Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, from time to time, I get taken to task, and a very good friend of mine in Ireland comes along and says, "Hey, Richard, about time I came on the show and went through some of the material that you're talking about because I can add something to it." And somebody who has only been doing this now for 14 months, I think, and trying desperately to learn as much as I can, I always say to Alan, "You're very welcome." So, all the way from Ireland, good old Alan James from the Circle of White Light Radio joins me, taking time off from his Rumble podcast. Hello, Alan.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing? Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you, and thank you for spending some time with me to catch up with some of the interesting topics that I've had going on and adding to it, as you say.
Well, you've been doing fantastic work, and the information you're putting out there has been brilliant. And, I'm not saying I'm any way a guru or anything like that. Yes, I've been awake for 23 years, and I've a lot of the topics that you do, I've kind of been there and seen it and been involved in it. And so just a few things that I know you said, well, what are we going to talk about? Well, I,
Yeah,
I have a list. I made
you've
a
got a list.
I've got a
Brilliant.
list.
Well, before we get to the list, I just want to do a shout out for another good friend of mine who's been very much looking after me and taking care of me. And that is the Good Food Project. And I want to just show their website up here on the screen. Here we go. The Good Food Project. We may have to stock up with food, ladies and gentlemen, if things get a bit tough, and you may need to sort of get some bits and bobs in. And the goodfoodproject.co.uk is a great place to start looking for various things. They do all sorts of stuff, including fresh vegetables, fresh organic meat, which I've just had to supply in. I'll let you know how that goes because it looks very yummy. Organic, good stuff, and various other things around the house for cleaning and personal care, dentures, and all of that. Plus, of course, your water jugs and things. So, just as a favour, I'm not paid to say this, ladies and gentlemen, it's just as a favour to Steve at the Good Food Project. We people who are on the, let's say, the aware side of things all need to stick together and help each other, and that's what it's about. Anyway, enough of that. Back to Alan and the Circle of White Light Radio. Hello, Alan. Before we get going, just for those viewers who don't know who you are and what you do, can you just give us a quick précis of what it is that you do and a little about your background?
Yeah, basically, I've been awake since 2001. 9/11 really was a Kickstarter. And a comment that was made the last time we did an interview, the book I was given at the time was The Biggest Secret by David Icke. Now, I don't really haven't watched Icke for a long time, but at the time, it was a book that was of interest to me. I read it. And but the problem was like when everybody kind of begins to wake up or start questioning things, when I was given that book, I did what most people do. The ego kicks in, and I was very arrogant and thinking that guy is a conspiracy theorist in his turquoise tracksuit and he's on Terry Wogan and he's a nutter, which is what people do, you know?
They
Now,
do.
I was very arrogant because I didn't do any research into David Icke. I didn't do any research into his work, but there I was pontificating about how I thought he was a conspiracy theorist, know nothing about his research. But then, so because I have a background in psychology, I stopped myself and said, hang on a minute, my ego is kicking in here. I'm being very arrogant, arrogant thinking I know better and ignorant to the fact that I don't. So I went off and I decided to do the research and I could prove these conspiracy theorists wrong. And 5 years later, I end up proving myself wrong. So apologies to anybody I called a conspiracy theorist at the time because you were right and I was wrong. Okay,
Well,
so I set up a website initially because I lived in London at the time, called Open Your Mind, and that website is available for download on my own website, Circle of White Light, and it was based on psychology because there's so many websites out there talking about chemtrails, 9/11, everything else. But I wanted to apply psychology to as to why people are being fooled by the
mm,
system and how
mm.
the ego works and how we should be challenging our belief systems and all that kind of stuff. So when I moved back to Ireland, I met a chap and we got on really well, Steve, and we set up Open Your Mind Radio in 2010, and we ran that for 9.5 years every week. Every Sunday, we were there doing an interview and interviewing people. So um, we amassed hundreds of interviews.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not surprised.
so we decided to take a sabbatical and take a break. And so I set up Circle of White Light Radio, and then I carried on and doing interviews. And it's only recently, well, since last year, I decided to then move over to Rumble. But the problem is with the Rumble channel, and I watched your channel with interest, obviously, Richard. One of the interviews you did with a guest on Rumble, on YouTube, I had something like 18,000 hits. On Rumble, I had something like 887. And that is the problem, is that YouTube is still the de facto video platform. And even though I have a Rumble channel and I have good information, good guests on there, most people default to YouTube. And I
Yes.
refuse to do YouTube because of the restrictions that YouTube put on people, you know?
Yeah. No,
Um,
I mean, I would be doing the same if it weren't for the fact that somehow, by the grace of, I seem to still be here on YouTube, which is quite extraordinary. People say, I'm surprised you've been able to get away with what you do. I'm very thrilled to be able to get away with what I do. And but my stuff should be, I haven't checked actually, it should be mirrored on both Odyssey and on Rumble. But anyway, so that's what you do. Now you've got a list. You've got a list of stuff about some of the recent shows that I've. There it is. Look at that. And you wanted to discuss some of the points, which is great because sometimes people forget some of the content or haven't seen it. And at the moment, I should just say, a lot of people who may think they're subscribed and getting notifications about my channel. I do get this all the time. People say it's not coming up. Sometimes they have to unsubscribe and resubscribe, press the bell notification because they're not alerted to the videos. And that is apparently something that YouTube do, whether they do that deliberately or not, whether it's just a glitch in the system. I couldn't possibly comment. But it might be worth just checking if you're not getting the stuff. So anyway, your list. Tell us what we're gonna. Well, let's go through it, shall we?
Yeah, well, before we start, I just want to say that remember, we're all on a path of knowledge, and some people are
Mm,
further down the road than others. It doesn't mean that I am the guru and know everything. I know what I know today.
yes.
Tomorrow, I might know something different that contradicts to what I know today. So, with a fluid belief system, I will just change. And Richard, as you know, I said to you in the very early days, entertain everything, but ask for the evidence and the facts, right?
Mm,
And I'd like to think that served you well over the last year and a half.
yes. Well, it certainly has. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I've had all the evidence when people come on the show. I've certainly entertained what they have. And I do get criticism from people saying, oh, you didn't ask enough stringent questions about this, that, and the other. And my philosophy has been that actually I don't think the audience are stupid. And I respect the audience's intelligence enough to think that they, before they take on board anything, they also have to do their own due diligence and say, do I believe this? Shall I find out more before suddenly rushing to buy something, whatever it might be, if somebody happens to be selling something, which often people are. But that sometimes is the way that these interviews, I'll come on the show if you don't mind promoting my book.
Mm.
And let's be fair, anybody who writes a book, I know what it's like writing books because I've done some. You don't make a lot of money.
Mm.
It's a hell of a lot of work, and if anybody can plug your book, and you get a couple of sales out of it, or even if you've got 100, you're still nowhere near making a fortune.
Yeah.
Especially on internet sites like YouTube, and on shows like ours, where the proportion of viewers really is very small. But people seem to think that, oh yeah, you've got someone because they're plugging their book and it's all about them making money. I just thought I'd get that off.
I know I've done the same. I've been there with you, people sending books in, I've done shows with books. The good thing is I'm not selling anything. And if people choose to go over to my Rumble channel, that's great, but you're not forced to do that. So there
Exactly.
you go. So I'm here not selling anything. So yeah, so we're all on a path of knowledge. So, but before I get down on the list, there's a couple of things I just want to mention. The other day you mentioned about route passing over.
About what? Oh, Ruth. Ruth.
Yeah,
Yes,
Ruth.
Ruth Scolmy. Yeah,
Yeah,
pass. Yeah.
I had planned, I did interview Ruth after you interviewed her, and I had planned to have Ruth and David Adelman on together as a round table to talk about the legal stuff.
Mm,
Obviously, that won't be happening now, but I just wanted to give a mention and, condolences to Ruth's family. Sorry to hear that she passed over, you know. Um, the other thing is, before we get into the list,
mm,
from me being a host to you being a host,
yes.
how are you doing with your journey over the last, year and a half, but since our last interview, because you've had such a condensed, very fast journey in learning, more
Yes.
so
Well,
than I did. So,
I,
how are you
the
coping?
I'm coping all right because everyone's very nice. Um, the interesting thing with the people who are aware of what the great harms are, and these are the terms I prefer to use rather than the wake and all that. I just say, they're aware of these things and their great harms. And on the whole, people are very understanding. They understand exactly as you said. We're all on a path. We're all at different points, and so people are not expecting everybody to know everything. So I sometimes get guests who know huge amounts. I had one the other day. I won't mention his name, and I'm sitting there thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have absolutely no idea, and some of it's going over my head. But what I will do is say to them, I'm not sure I fully understand. Can you break that down for me? Unless, of course, they are somebody who will talk very rapidly and, the points have gone and I can't remember it. But that's very rare. Mostly people do take me as a thickie and they'll lead me gently through. And that's great because I'm playing the role of somebody who perhaps has no knowledge in this certain area. And I try not to get into too much heavy detail because if they're writing a book or they've got a website or that's their knowledge base, I let them do the work. I'm just really interpreting. So I found it a fascinating journey. And the only problem I would say from my point of view is because I'm so busy doing these and people seem to want to go on the show, I don't have that much time to reflect on the interviews that I've done and go, wow, that point about such and such, I had, because I'm just having to absorb it at a massive rate. But I think the audience are also having to do that because information is coming thick and fast, not just from my channel, but from the myriad of channels who are doing exactly the same.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you have to kind of take it in and you have to analyze it and you have to do the research and look into it. And then you'll have things that will resonate with you and other things won't. I've had that where, somebody told me about something and I said, no, that's not resonating with me. So I'd put it on the shelf. And 2 years later, it
Right.
then resonated. And then I took it off and then I said, right, okay, now it's time to do a show about this. It's now
Yeah.
resonating with me. So there's information you're not ready for. So I just put that on the shelf and go, I'm not really ready for that. I'll come back to it when I am.
Well, I can say that. I mean, that's something that I keep getting people saying, "Will you do flat Earth stuff?" And I have penciled in somebody to talk about that, but I have put that well back because to me, it's interesting. Maybe there's something I don't know too much about. I haven't investigated it myself. I've been, people keep saying, "Oh, you should, you should, you should." It's very important, and I say, but whether I know or not, does that change my ability right now to do something? Whereas if I know a little bit about medical interventions and certain drugs, I know not to necessarily take certain things right now that affects me today. And I'm much more interested in stuff that affects me, affects the audience today, than perhaps a long term something which I can do nothing about and nobody else seems to be able to do anything about that is interesting, but more intellectually than. I mean, we've got so many things to worry about. Why add to it? And the other question is it a distraction? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, so
Well, I kind of reserve my judgment on that. But what I try and do is focus on what I can change and leave
yeah,
alone the things I can't. Whether the earth is flat, rectangle, square, it doesn't matter. I can't do anything about it.
right.
So
And that seems to be, that's very much my attitude. But other people are sort of like pushing me. So Richard, you must. I have in principle agree. I might have even got a date sometime in February somewhere. Oh, we are in February. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
no, that's fine.
let's get to your list then,
Right,
because
okay.
time is a ticking.
I know. And again, we have to say to people, look, we only have about an hour.
Hmm.
So we could break down each one of these topics and we could talk an hour in each one of the topics.
Oh, of course.
So some people get very anal over certain things and go, oh, you didn't say this, that, and the other. We only have an hour. So this is just an overview of things that we're going to be talking about. Okay. Now, what myself and Richard said before we went live was that because we've so much to talk about, if you do run out of time, we'll do a part two, but the part two will be on my Rumble channel, and then we'll have a bit more time on my Rumble channel. So Richard's up for doing that. So that would be great, and we'll do the part two. So just to start off with, as I say, you've done so many shows
Hmm.
and talked about so many things. And I'm just kind of giving you a bit of feedback on my thoughts and my experience of what I've come across in people I've interviewed over the years I've been doing it. And I'm going to skip a few as well, because we won't get them all done. There's a few things on the list. We'll see how we are with time anyway. The first thing on the list was you were talking about AI. Now,
Hmm.
I'm currently learning to program using Python and programming. And
Is that Monty?
actually, believe it or not, Python programming language was named after Monty Python.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, so you're spot on. 10 marks for that one. Um,
Do you have to type in right at the very beginning? And now for something completely different.
no, I hope not. I hope you don't have to do that. So the Python programming languages is what I'm learning at the moment.
Right.
So I wanted to write a program designed to analyze lottery numbers for a bit of fun as a bit of practice.
Hmm.
So I went to Chat GPT and I typed in, write Python program, blah, 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 and it just wouldn't do it. It just kind of said the lottery is random. Bye bye. That's it. End of play. It
Right.
wasn't going to give me any information. So I went ahead and wrote my own program anyway. But the thing is with the likes of GPT and some of these other AI programs and websites is that they're not technically AI. They're not sentient. All right. They can't think for themselves. All they're doing is finding information out there that's already out there and then putting it on the screen for you to see. So
Yes.
that's the only thing I'll say about AI. It's not sentient yet, or what we are using as a website or as a product is just repeating information that's already out there.
Well, my worry, and I made the video saying something along the lines is it the new guru? Because it seems to me people are like water. They find the line of least resistance, and that may not always be a good thing. We've seen that with convenience shops and big supermarkets. Instead of going out and hunter and gathering their own food, they're going and eating the highly processed rubbish. And even though they know it's highly processed rubbish because it's convenient, they still shove it in their gobs. And my worry with and Chat GTP and those sort of things is that you go there, you get something spewed out, you then take it as gospel,
Mm.
and you're not and you don't get references to where that information has been found. And because of that, whereas if you go to the library or you read books, you can see the author, and if it's a professional book, there'll be references to where certain research has been carried out, and you can follow that and just double check it. How do you double check anything in ChatGPT? It seems to me that is the worry. And as you say, but even if it was thinking for itself, how do you check its thinking?
Yeah, well, I totally agree. The way I see AI is this, for me with programming anyway, Chat GPT, have to get that right, put my teeth in. It's like having a friend sitting beside you who knows a bit more about programming than I do.
Right.
And I'm asking my friend, how do we fix this problem? And
Yes.
he might not know, or he might know a bit more than me. So I will take his advice and go, well, I'll try that and I'll give it a try. Okay.
Do you
Now,
do,
yeah,
do you not think though? Because people are saying, "Oh, we're using it now to write legal letters. We're using it to do all this homework." But is it not just taking away our ability to think?
of course, anything that stops you thinking and makes it easy and makes us lazy
Right.
is going to affect us in some way. Totally agree. But there are times that you just, especially with me when it comes to programming and I'm learning, because I only
Yes.
use really Chat GPT for programming. And I might have an issue that I just can't find a solution to, or I'm racking my brain. I'm thinking, I really don't know how this works. So I can type in the issue that I'm having in Chat GPT, and it'll come up with might have a solution, or might give me another way to think, so I
Right.
can try something else. So I think AI is going to be a bit like money. It's going to be neutral, and it's how you use it. But you have to remember you don't rely on it and don't trust it.
Yeah. But my worry is that people will rely on it and will trust it
Mm,
because people basically will be lazy.
yeah,
Because anything that's hard, and people also are impatient.
yeah, totally. And of course, human nature is we take the least path of resistance. We're designed to do
Exactly.
that. You know,
Yeah.
it's in our DNA to do that.
Yeah.
And
Right.
anything that the elites come out with always tends to be something that will save you time or save you
Oh,
thinking
yes.
time.
It's all for our
You know,
benefit.
it's
And
all
then
for
you
our
think,
benefit. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's just a quick kind of heads up on my thoughts on the AI thing.
Yes.
Um, to me, it's just a tool to help
Hmm.
me if I get stuck. But at the end of the day, it's not going to um it's not gonna give me the knowledge of being a programmer. Me learning and studying and putting it
Yes.
in my
Yeah.
mind is how I'm going to develop my programming skills,
Yeah.
not going to chat GPT all the time. Okay, brilliant. So that's AI. Just a quick mention to that. Politics, right? Big subject with politics.
Yeah.
Over the years, obviously talking to a lot of people involved and politicians and stuff I've interviewed. My own opinion, and this is just my own opinion on
Mm.
politics, is that politicians are there to spin the plates. They're not there to fix the problem. They're there to give you the illusion that they're trying to fix the problem, but they never will fix the problem because the people at the top like the situation the way it is. That they are the people who control everything and they have a say, and you are just the peasants who are, struggling and managing to, keep afloat. They
Yeah.
like it. They like it like that. They like the
Of course.
control. They like the management. And
Yeah.
so this idea that let's go and vote for a politician and let's change, it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee, you know?
Mm.
The clowns might change, but the circus stays the same, you know?
Yeah.
So this is why I deregistered voting for a long time. And
Good man.
oh, I deregistered years ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was in I obviously play music. I used to play music professionally. And I was in the studio last Sunday with the band I have a jam with. And we were talking about this subject about voting. And the lad said, "But if you don't vote, you won't change anything." And I said,
Yeah. Same old argument.
let's talk about voting. Ireland had a vote regarding the Lisbon Treaty a few years ago, right? And I
Yeah.
interviewed an MEP that was in Europe at the time called Cathy Sinnott. And these interviews are all available, by the way, on my old OIM YouTube channel. So you can hear all these interviews. And Kathy said that she was heard the whispers in the corridors over there in Europe that Ireland is going to vote yes, regardless of what the people vote. So what happened with the Lisbon Treaty in Ireland? Well, first of all, the Irish people voted no. But
Yeah.
the Irish government said, you got it wrong. That's not
Yeah.
what we wanted. So we're going to ask you again because you're not too sure. And of course, it's a miracle. The yes vote came in. Surprise, surprise. Okay.
I mean, I remember that. I remember that going through that, and I remember just, well, probably having my jaw extremely open, thinking, people have voted. They've come back with a thing. They've been told that they were stupid. Isn't that funny? We remember a referendum similar to that recently, and yet they then did it again. At what point did the? I mean, I know they make jokes about the Irish, but at what point did the Irish really go, hold on a second, we've done the vote?
Yeah.
Why did they just go, oh, okay there,
Yeah.
Murphy, we'll just do it again then?
What can I say? Is that not proof enough to the Irish people that the system is rigged? And
Yes,
when an interviewing Cathy Sinnott, MEP, and she said, "Oh, they said it to me in Europe that Ireland's going to be a yes. It doesn't matter what the people want."
it doesn't matter what the people want,
Yeah.
blimey. Yeah, well,
Now,
this is it.
and my own opinion on local voting elections, see, over in the UK, when you finished your voting on the Friday, you start counting. But over
Right.
here in Ireland, it's sure, let's put the voting boxes in the police stations and we make sure they're protected. And we start counting on Monday morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything can happen in those 48 hours then.
I mean, seriously, you can't write the stuff. So that's why I don't vote. What's the point? I just don't vote. And it's up to people if they feel they want to vote, go ahead. But it's just to
Do
me,
you think that not? I mean, my opinion is the whole system is wrong. The whole House of
yeah, of
Commons, the
course,
two-party system, all of that is
yeah,
wrong, because and we've proved it. I mean, the evidence is just look outside the window.
yeah,
That's it. But trying to have that conversation in which people can think outside the box and go, oh, well, what else is there? Well, there's a whole universe of ideas out there. You've just got one, and that's all you're stuck with. But why don't you start thinking that there would be other ways, and particularly grassroots, and going back to shires and people organising themselves. I just think the whole thing, but I also think, for the sake of adding my 10 pence worth to it, is it's crumbling and it is going to fall apart.
yeah, yeah. It's dinosaur politics.
Yeah,
I call it.
definitely.
And in my own opinion, there's two types of people in politics. You've got, people who knock at your door. You have the naive, ignorant person who actually thinks they'll go in and make a change. But we
Yeah,
already had that in Ireland. We had an Irish TV broadcaster or radio broadcaster called George Lee, who went into one of the political parties, and he was only in there 9 months and left because he realized that he was number one, he was wasting his time, it was institutionalized, and he didn't want to support the bills that were going through.
right.
So after 9 months, he left.
He left.
It's
Yeah,
rigged. And over here in Ireland, probably like your parties in the UK, you have a party whip system, and that party whip whips the politicians in to make sure they vote the,
the
the way
correct
they want
way.
it. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So, politics, it's dinosaur politics or parasite politics, whatever you want to call it.
Well, it's
And
old world, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
and it's the old system, and we are moving to a new system, and they don't like it. They're holding on, but they are slipping away.
Now, one of the things that you talk about, which you also want to mention, is the whole idea of whether you're a slave or whether you're a sovereign.
Hmm.
Now, if you look at the European Convention on Human Rights, it says in Article 4, prohibition of slavery and forced labor. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. No one shall be required to perform forced or compulsory labor. And Article 3, and this is for the UK because your government are talking about bringing in the draft again for fighting the Russians. It says here any service of a military character or in the case of conscientious objectors in countries where they are recognized, service extracted instead of compulsory military service. So, at the end of the day, you can't be a little bit pregnant. You're either a slave or you're either a sovereign citizen, right?
Mm.
And if you're sovereign, then you should say, I don't consent, which we're going to be getting onto in a minute, right? When you
Okay.
say I don't consent, because there's a maxim in law that says consent creates the law. And
Right.
if you consent to it, then the law is created and it applies to you. But if you
Yes.
say, I don't consent, because Richard, you've done enough videos now, everything's assumed and presumed in law.
Yes.
So the answer is yes until you say no, you know?
Exactly. I don't consent. I rebut your presumptions.
Okay, so does the government not realize that you can't be a little bit pregnant? You're either a slave or
Well,
you're a
these days
sovereign.
a man can be a woman, and all of these things. So you probably can be a little bit pregnant, and they probably got little bit pregnant hospitals in which little bit pregnant people can go and pretend to be pregnant, and then realise it was just a fart.
Yeah. It's well, we
But
won't
anyway, sorry,
no,
yeah,
no, we won't even go down that road, but
no, no,
you
don't
get
go
my
down that
point.
road.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm going to share the screen uh,
Okay.
yeah, in a minute just to talk about the whole idea of tax on your labor. Because there
Right.
was a great documentary that was brought out by Aaron Russo called Freedom to Fascism, where he's a Hollywood director. He directed the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. And he wanted to do the research as to whether you had to pay tax on your earnings. So he went and did a documentary, did the research, and he found out that it was never um, ratified where people in America had to pay tax on their earnings. He found out the truth. Um, and basically, they just said, well, we'll just send in the IRS as the thugs, and you won't have anything, you
Mm.
won't be able to do anything about it, you know? And this is kind of common practice to find out the information of whether you pay tax on your labor. Now, over on my Rumble channel, I have done a a video on the history of Ireland and what happened in Ireland regarding tax on your labor. Okay, so I've looked into this,
Mm.
and we have had my co-host on my other radio show, Steve, actually asked a lady who worked for the Inland Revenue to find the law that says we pay tax on our earnings. And she laughed at him and then went away and then came back and said, I can't find it. And I've asked people who are on a higher grade than I am, and they can't find it. Now, you would think a
Yes.
law as simple as do we pay tax on our earnings would be on the statute books, but we can't find it. Now, if it is out there, if the law is there, by all means, please send me the link to where it is, and I'll change my video and update people. But I
Mm.
want to share this screen. Um, just bear with me for a minute. I'll just call it up here,
Okay.
and I want to show people this. Share screen. So, can everybody see that? Hopefully, they can.
Yep.
Right. This was on the Inland Revenue website back around 2016, I think. And this was written, this was a talk that was done by the head of the Inland Revenue at the time, a lady called Josephine Feely. Now, you would think that the head of the Inland Revenue would know whether tax is compulsory or not. Surely, she's the head of the Inland Revenue, and
Yeah.
this came from the Inland Revenue website over here in Ireland before it was pulled off. So let me just go down the list. I'm not going to read everything, but I just, you have legal experts that come on your show, Richard, and maybe they can have a look at this. And it says here in yellow, I've highlighted, the state rules by consent, and by extension, taxes by consent.
Oh.
So let's go down further. And she says, in a country which rules by consent, I believe that to tax by consent. Let's go down even further regarding the property tax. And it says here, the local property tax experience leads me to the final observation I would like to make, or perhaps it leads me back to the start. We tax by consent. Now,
So, yeah.
now, surely the head of the Inland Revenue, if we would know whether there's a law that says that we have to pay tax and we should be able to find it. But when you look at the history of Ireland after the War of Independence, a voluntary tax came in after the war to rebuild the country, which was only supposed to be in for a period of time, my understanding is. But when they seen how much money was being made between the revenue coming in and the corporation tax, they thought, let's keep our mouth shut. So up to the early 1960s, people had to do their own tax bill. And my dad is 88 years old, and he remembers having to do his own tax until in the 60s they brought in a UK system called PAYE, and then they said, well, people are having problem and we're not have to chase these people up for not paying tax and all this kind of stuff. So we'll bring in a system where we'll take the money first, and then people don't have to do it. There's the lazy thing again. Oh, we'll do it
Mm.
all for you, make it easy for you.
Yes.
So we have been paying this tax. Um, Obviously, we're taxed by consent, according to Josephine Feely. When did I consent to pay tax? Where did I sign a contract with my government to say, I'm going to pay tax? Now, in 2008, we had the financial crash. So they brought in a thing called the USC over here in Ireland called the Universal Social Charge, which was supposed to only come in for 4 years. Guess what? They're still charging
There's
us.
still. That's outrageous. I'm just looking here on the internet to see if the question is tax voluntary in the UK. just in case it comes up somewhere on legislation.co.uk and simply says, "Oh yes, tax is voluntary," or that you may consent. One question here says, "Can I pay more tax voluntary?" Well, why would you want to do that when the money is obviously going off to fund wars and things? One website that says income tax was abolished and then reintroduced following the end of the Napoleonic War in 1815. But I can't get that page to actually come up. Freedom of information request, however, I'm just looking at this. I'll bring it on the screen if it's relevant, and I don't know. There's a Mr. James on this, actually, funnily enough. Let me bring this over here if I can, and then we'll go to it and see if we can see this a bit better. So is income tax voluntary? And this is a request to HM Customs, and see what they say. The information on this, blah, 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 blah. So here we go. Thank you for your question, in which you ask, is income tax voluntary? Questions like this are generally not answerable under the terms of Freedom of Information Act. I wonder why.
Now, if it was a law, surely they say, yeah, sure, here's the law. There you go. It's like, do I have to pay road tax? Well, here's a link to the law that says you have to pay road tax. Why are they so guarded
Yeah.
regarding this?
It does say, okay, so questions like this are generally not under the terms of freedom, but the straight answer is no. If you want information, HMR publishes taxes legislation and our manuals, which set out guidance on this, and here is the link in the library, which doesn't really help you, I suppose, because you've got to try and work it out. I mean, just saying no doesn't really answer the question, because how do you know that they are being truthful other than just sort of trying to get over the fact that somebody's asked a very awkward question?
Well, one thing Mark Stevens said, he's a legal guy, which I'll be talking about shortly, and he said you just have to take that everything they say is a lie and
Yeah.
ask them to verify the information. Okay? That's the best way to do it. Assume that everything they say is a lie and ask them to verify the information. So if what I'm saying is wrong and there is a law, then please send me a link to that law and I'll happily do another video to clarify the situation. But as of yet, I've no link. Nobody sent me a link. We've asked people in Inland Revenue to send us the information. They laughed at us and then came back and said, we can't find it.
Right.
So,
Well, if they can't find it, they can't enforce it.
well, it's voluntary. And again, we have Josephine Feely who turns around and says we tax by consent. Well, there's the evidence.
Right.
When did we
And
consent?
yes, well, exactly.
Okay.
I don't remember consenting.
Either do I. Now, I've another screen I want you to share. Something that you talk about is the courts.
Yes.
So let me just load this up. And again, this is something that I was told. Again, if I'm wrong, by all means, please email me and tell me if I'm wrong. Okay. So what you're seeing here is a picture of an Irish court. And above where the judge sits, you'll see a harp.
Yes.
But what's missing from this to say that it's a republic is EIRE, right? If we were a true republic, you see what happened is we're going back to history, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I just want to show you this picture. So if we were a true Irish republic, we'd have EIRE underneath. And if you see a flag with a yellow fringe around it, that's the corporation, it's not the country.
Yes.
Okay?
It's
Now, the reason why I'm showing you that is because Ireland is still, my understanding based on my interviews and people I've spoken to, is Ireland is still under UK rule. In 1919, we had our original constitution and we had a process in there called direct democracy, where you could fire a politician if he didn't do his job, or you could have a referendum if you had a number of signatures and call a referendum. So if you want everybody in London to wear pink shoes, if you've 100,000 signatures, you can call a referendum, right? That's direct democracy. Okay. So we had that in our original constitution. Now, the problem was that King George V There was another constitution put out in 1922, and he did a bit of a switcheroony at the time and put us back under UK rule in 1922, but gave us home rule. Okay. And we have been under UK rule since 1922. That's what I've been told by the guests that I've interviewed who've done the research. Now, again, if that's wrong, by all means, tell me it's wrong and let me know. But that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of. Because a true republic, democracy doesn't work. 51% of people telling 49% what to do is wrong. If you
Mm.
have a true republic, you're talking about 75 or 80% of the people, which is a fair estimate that that's what the people want. You won't please everybody, but if
No.
you're pleasing 75 to 80% of the population, well, then that's generally a good consensus, not
Yes.
51 against 49.
No, because you've got that. Well, I was going to say you've got that situation in which you've got one woman and five lads, and the five lads want to rape the one woman.
Yeah.
Well, if all five, you're not going to get a consensus. But the woman says, actually, I'm against this idea,
Mm.
and the other five say, well, we want to. You've got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Big time. Big time. So
You've got
democracy.
you've got gang. What do they call it? You've got well, it's a gang against it's the big boys against the small minority.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And they like to give you this perception that democracy, we have democracy. No, we don't. We have a dictatorship. We haven't had a proper democracy for a very, very long time. It's the illusion of the plate spinning with the
Mm,
politicians. And so yeah, so sorry, I meant one thing I went into there was that two people who knock at your door.
mm,
The first one is the naive, ignorant person who thinks they can make a change, but they won't. And
mm.
then there's the other person who knows the system is rigged, but they want to get in for 5 years and they get a nice salary and a nice pension and they kick the ball down the road and then
Yeah,
it carries on. Okay. That's my opinion of the people who knock at my door, right?
who want to be in
Yeah,
Parliament.
yeah. So let's go into um I also talk about solutions, and we'll watch the time. We'll end up on a couple of solutions if that's okay, Richard.
Of course,
You let me
yes,
know,
I do like solutions.
because I don't want to give the problems. I think I am focused on solutions, but it's just clarifying a couple of things. But
Mm,
I sent you over a link of a guy that I interviewed years ago called Mark Stevens in America, and he was saying that before you even take on the law, they have to work out that they have jurisdiction over you, which they don't.
right.
Okay. And Mark said that he's been in court, and if he knows that they are really going to try and push him to try and fine him or jail him or something, the three things that he says in court, and he's used this, um, is number one, he says, do the laws apply to me if I'm in the country? Like, do the laws apply to Richard Vobes because he's living in the UK? And they go, well, of course. You go, well, show me the evidence. Show me the evidence that the laws apply to you. Is your name on the paperwork? Does it say, a road tax has to be paid by Richard Vobes?
Right.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah. I
it,
guess if you're saying that you're, well, let's not go down there. Yeah, because that's complicated.
yeah. So, but we hear about acts and statutes. What
Yes.
what is an act? Well, an act stands for Advanced Corporation Tax.
Is that what it stands for?
That's what it stands for, Advanced
Hmm.
Corporation Tax. Okay. And if you have a constitution, where does it apply to you? I mean, remember, the Irish Constitution was written in 1919, the original one, and the one that they normally refer to in the Blue Book is 1937, right? But I wasn't even born then, so how does that apply to me, really? You know?
Mm.
Um, and so there's three things that I'm
So
just
does the
looking
law
here.
apply to me
Okay,
and then prove it? Yeah.
yeah, okay. So the three things he says in court is, um, yeah, let's see. Do, 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 do.
You did the first one. Do the laws apply to me?
Yeah, the first one is about being, let me see, can I get a fair hearing if there is a conflict of interest? Okay. So,
Can I?
can you get a fair hearing if there's a conflict of interest?
Right.
Right. So the answer has to be, well, no, you can't get a fair hearing if there's a conflict of interest, right?
No. Yeah.
Then
Well.
Then the next one is, am I entitled to a fair trial? Well, they'll go, well, of course you are. Of course you're entitled. And then they start raising their eyebrows after them two questions. And then the third question will be, who do you represent here today, or who are you acting on behalf to the judge? So please explain to me how you can be acting as a crown to be independent at the same time, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So there are the three questions that Mark has used in court because, again, he went into court because he wanted to test the system. But we all know the last thing you want to do is, if you can avoid going into court and do the paperwork outside the court, it's better if you can do that. But these are the
Yeah.
three questions that he used. And if people want to listen to that interview, I can send them a link to it and they can hear Mark talk about his experiences. Now, somebody did do this in court in Ireland over here, and Mark showed me the paperwork. He didn't win the case, but it got just struck out because they didn't want him winning,
Right. Oh, okay.
right? But it did get struck out. And they always say the pen is mightier than the sword. But if you take away the S from the word sword, what do you get?
Well, you've got
Word.
word.
Yeah.
Mm.
So the word is mightier than the sword, you know? So use the paperwork to take on rather than fighting, violence and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Use the power of the pen to do all the work.
Yeah, because you're not actually talking to real people. You're talking to dead entities. It's your represent your,
Mm.
your fictional persona.
Mhm.
Your name
Yeah,
is effectively talking to these other fictional personas. So it is all sort of grammar
yeah,
that's talking. You're not talking to your grandma. You're using grammar to talk to these fictional people. And for me, that always comes back to you need people to enact these fictions. Like in theatre, you need actors in order to bring a play to life
yeah,
on a stage, or you can just read it in a book. And the theatre wouldn't exist if it wasn't first written down in a book, and that's effectively what you're doing when you're using the paperwork, is you're just writing the book.
mm,
So if you can save having to get dressed up and stand there and watch another bloke dressed up in his little wig and his gown and and the gavel and all that nonsense, the better, I would imagine.
yeah, totally, totally. I mean, don't even go into court if you can avoid it. Do it
Mm.
on the paperwork. And the one thing on your show that you mentioned, a chap called Richard Cumbers, who I've known for years. Richard told us about a product in clothing called Elastane, which is not good for you and it can affect people against their skin. So,
Right.
and it's spelled Elastane. So, if people want to check it out and make sure that your products don't have elastane in your clothes, make sure it doesn't have that in it because it can affect some people. So, just to let
So
you know.
is that a chemical that's used to make certain products?
Yeah, it's something in the chemical in the clothing, you know.
Right. Right.
I'm not an expert on it. I just remember Richard saying it to me. Now, solutions. Right.
Yes.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
talk solutions.
Go for it.
Right. Now, you did an interview there a while ago with a lady called Helen Fleming, and she was talking about bioresonance. And that's
Mm.
something that I've kind of been involved in. And this first device is called the Pain Genie. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Now, when I interviewed Richard Cumbers way back in 2016, and Richard was telling me about, he's English, but he has family over here in Ireland. And he was telling us all about this product called the Pain Genie. And we said, well, put your money where your mouth is and prove that it works. And he said,
Yeah.
okay. So Richard drove up from County Clare to where we were in Meath, and he treated my co-host and my co-host's wife, and within 10 minutes of us being treated, our pain had gone.
Wow.
And we were just blown away by this. I mean, if there's the evidence. One minute we had pain, next minute we had no pain, right? And we were blown away with this. So I went ahead and not only got a pain genie, but I also did the training with Richard Cumbers, and Richard did phase one of the training with me. So I'm now kind of qualified energy healer regarding the Pain Genie. And
So is that so? Just tell us what it does then. How does it work? This
yeah,
pain genie.
basically what it does is, the best way to explain it is, the way acupuncture you put the needles in, and
Yeah.
it affects the nerves in your body, and you tweak it. Well, the pain genie is for energy healing, and in our body we have meridian lines, and it's all about the flow of energy. And what the pain genie does is when I'm doing it on people, I hope you can see that.
Yeah.
The pain genie, when you have a blockage of energy in your body, it sticks, right? It finds it. And I say to people, don't tell me where your pain is. Let the pain genie find it. And
Right.
I'll be doing their arm or their back because there's different ways you can treat people. And it will stick. And I'll go, is it there? And they go, yeah.
So when you say it sticks, I mean it's like a magnet hitting another
Yeah,
magnetic point and going, "Oh, I can't move."
that's it. It finds the blockage of the energy. And then
Right.
what I do is I use the methods that I've been trained to use with the pain genie to clear that blockage. And I'll give you an example. I had a chap I know who's an audiologist said to me that I can't play with my kids because my arm hurts. I keep carrying this equipment around all the time. Again, I have him on interview saying this.
Hmm.
And if anybody wants to hear the interview, I can send it to them. And he said, I carry my equipment around all the time and my shoulders at me, and I just can't do anything. And I said, well, look, why don't you come to me and I'll see what I can do and I'll treat you. So the first treatment I gave him was on the arm because there's different ways to treat them. I gave him the arm treatment and I said, right, what's going to happen is when you treat people with the pain genie, okay, it's like an iceberg, okay? So you chop the top off the iceberg and another bit pops up, and you
Hmm.
chop another bit and another bit pops up because I'm reversing the pain. I'm going back in time to treat the pain, okay? Because
Right.
there's a homeopath in the 1800s called Herring, and Herring's law states that we heal from the head down, organs outwards, and back in time. So as I heal people, I'm
Hmm.
going back in time to the original time the pain started to happen.
Oh, I
Right.
see.
So I might need to treat people twice, or I might need to treat people 7 times. It depends. But what happens is a Herx effect happens, and the pain
A
gets
what? A what effect?
a Herx effect. It's a reaction to the treatment, and the pain sometimes gets worse before it gets better because you're extracting the pain from the body.
Right.
So when I treated Kevin, he said, he said, when I left your house and after a couple of hours, the pain did get a little bit worse, but he said, you told me that would happen. So I went with
Yeah.
it.
So the
So
poor bloke was crippled leaving your house, unable to walk. But a few weeks later, he was fine.
he was fine. So anyway, he said, "Well, look, he said, look, I'll come for another treatment because I was out of pain for a good few hours." So
Hmm.
that was kind of he was enthusiastic about that. And I said, "Right, come back to me, and I'll give you another treatment. But this time, I'm going to do your back. I'm going to do the full treatment on your back." Okay. So I did the full treatment, and again, he said, "Oh, he went away thinking, oh, I'm going to be in pain and all that kind of stuff." And I didn't see him for a few weeks. And then I met up with him. And I said, "Oh, how are you doing?" He said, "Alan," he said, "when you treated me the second time, my pain went and never came back."
Wow.
He said, "I can now play ball with my kids. I've no problem with my shoulder."
Oh, that's amazing. So, will you give us the information about this Pain Genie so people can check it out?
I will indeed. I will
Yeah.
indeed.
We'll put that in the show notes
Okay.
in the description, which will be great.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
no worries at all. And again, look,
And I
what
know you're not making any money out of this.
I don't make any money out of this. I'm
Hmm.
just, like you, I'm a host. I asked Richard to put his money where his mouth is and to
Hmm.
prove to me that this did what it said on the tin. And he drove up from County Clare and he treated three of us and our pain went.
I just hope that it does come now in a tin.
Right. Now, well, it's the expensive bit. It's a bit pricey, but look, all I'm saying is this, right? It's not the be all and end all. It doesn't fix everything. All
Right.
right. But
Yeah.
this is my go-to device. When I have a pain, and I can put this in my pocket and carry it around with me, and I can treat my friends and my family, and I've treated people before with this device. Okay.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
and sometimes when you treat people and the pain's gone, they don't believe it. They've
No.
this smile on the face and you just don't
Yeah,
know what
well, I know.
happened.
Yeah, exactly. If you've had, especially if it's chronic and suddenly you've been relieved,
Yeah,
just that. If you've got like, we all know what it's like if you've got your teeth in pain and then somehow it's relieved and you're just like, oh my god, life suddenly is worth living again.
exactly, exactly. And being in pain is not good. The other
No.
device I have here, which you obviously know about is called a spooky.
Well, I've never seen one.
Okay.
I have got a an interviewee coming on the show to talk about Spooky 2, which does sound very scary to me. So I'm going to lower the lights and make sure there's some ghosts floating about. But this came to me, my interview, because I interviewed a gentleman who was talking about I forget the name of the energy now.
Quantum entanglement.
Well, he didn't describe it as that. It was beginning with C, like cadence energy or
All right.
something.
Okay.
I can't remember now. I've had so many interviews. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
going,
I know. Yeah.
you're just nodding at them, going, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting." Yeah, thanks very much. But it was something resonance or something. I can't remember.
Bioresonance.
But yeah, oh no, that was the lady
That's
with
Helen
the
Fleming.
yeah. Anyway, so tell me about Spooky 2, because this is another gadget that does it in a different way.
Yeah, basically, for people who don't know, they need to research a chap called Royal Raymond Rife. And
Royal Raymond
Royal,
Rife.
Royal Raymond Rife.
Who names their child? I baptized this child Royal. I mean, but they were.
It was back in the 1920s.
All
Okay.
right, fair enough. Yeah.
So Royal Raymond Rife, okay, was a man dedicated to try and help people, especially at the time with cancers and whooping cough going around at the time.
Yes.
So he wasn't a scientist, but he actually invented a microscope that was could magnify a virus to the level that he could see it under the microscope. I think it was 160,000 times. And
Wow.
he built this microscope. He wasn't even an engineer. He just had the skills to do it.
Put his mind to it.
He
Yeah.
put his mind to it, right? So he could see the virus underneath the microscope, right? So he then said, right, I need to be able to kill these parasites or these viruses without affecting anything else in the body. So he spoke to the father of radio at the time, a guy called DeForester, and he asked him to build a device called a frequency generator. And the frequency generator would produce frequencies in a range of frequencies where he could turn up the power. And what he did was he would look at the virus underneath the microscope and then slowly go through the frequencies, and then he'd find the exact frequency where the virus on its own would be vibrating, okay, and then he'd turn up the power and destroy the virus.
Oh,
So,
right.
so another example is this. You obviously heard about the opera singer where she's singing and she
Breaks
goes
the glass.
woo, and the glass smashes. Sorry about that, Rich.
That's all right. Just smashed my brain.
Yeah. So the opera singer sings, right? Well, she's singing on the same frequency of the glass and it
Yes.
cancels it out.
Right. And it
So,
shatters.
so
And so
what?
that's what's happening with the virus. So your gadget. I'm jumping ahead because time is
Yeah.
ticking.
Okay.
Your gadget there, the spooky gadget, which isn't really that spooky by the sounds of it, is there to tune into the viruses that you may have in your body and eliminate them.
Well, that's half of what the spooky is because the spooky uses rife frequencies, and there's a database that you can go to type in what ailment you have. But
Oh, I see.
but
So they know what those frequencies are. That's very
yeah,
good.
yeah, the database has the frequency of the illness that you might be interested in getting rid of. Okay, it's a bit more convoluted than that, but
Hmm.
it was called the spooky because it was something that Einstein said when Einstein realized about healing from a distance. He said that's spooky, which he called quantum entanglement.
Right.
And quantum entanglement is when you get an atom, right, and you split it in half. And if you treat this part of the atom, it'll also treat this part. So I could get your fingernail, Richard,
Well, I'd rather you didn't.
and I can put your fingernail into the spooky, and I can
Yeah.
send healing frequencies to you through your fingernail, and you will be benefiting from that. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world,
Right.
I can still treat you because that fingernail is still part of you. And that's
Yes.
called quantum entanglement. And Einstein came across that and he called it spooky. So John White, who designed the spooky, called it the spooky because of that.
Right. Because of that. I'm sort of got the
I know.
envisage now. If you
Yeah.
peeling off my fingernail and the amount of pain I would be in as you take that fingernail.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, so
You,
that's the spooky device in a nutshell. And again,
I believe I have got John White. I believe I've got John White in the diary to come on the show to talk about it in a lot more depth, actually.
yeah, no, that's cool. The problem is that what John doesn't realize is I left a message, a couple of messages on the spooky forum, saying that I'd like to do a tutorial and teach people about the spooky. And I actually had a tutor from the spooky team on the Zoom call to actually teach about it. And whoever is doing the admin on the spooky Facebook page is keeps deleting that message. So I don't know why they're affecting John's business regarding the spooky, but they obviously don't want to promote the spooky or they're sabotaging his spooky device because for somebody who's trying to promote and help John with the spooky, because I've interviewed John a couple of times, and
Mm.
that's where I got the spooky off. One of John's team sent it over to me. So who's the person on the Facebook page, on the spooky Facebook page, that's sabotaging John's business? I'd like to know who that is.
I
Anyway,
d- yeah,
so I
I d-
won't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I have used the spooky, and I'm planning to be setting up here in my office to actually start treating. I've used it to get rid of heavy metals on myself, my family, my son. Um, so that's another product just for people to look at. The other thing quickly for solutions, um,
well, we've gone over the hour.
are we? Okay, well
We've
then
gone over
let's
the
do a
hour.
part two
We'll do
on
a part two on your show.
my show, and I'll tick off the things on the list, and then we'll do a part two on my show, and we'll continue. Maybe we'll do it in the next few days. We'll sort something. I know you're very
We'll
busy,
sort
Vicky,
something out. Yeah, absolutely.
but
I don't like to keep these on too long
yeah,
because if as soon as people see it's an hour long or over an hour long, they go, oh, I don't know, it's a bit long now.
I told you, Ray, 45 minutes is normally the attention span, so we're over that
Yeah,
that
we're
period.
already over that. But
But
listen,
thank you for having me on. Thank you.
it's my pleasure. It's always good to have a chat with you and to go over some of the old stuff that I've gone to, and just it reminds people of the interviews that I've done, or perhaps excites them to those that they have missed, because there are loads in there, and I'm amazed that I've done so many as I have. And so it's useful to do all of that. And thank you for all the different points that you have given on this. So, and people can find you at Circle of White Light Radio on Rumble. They just need to
Yeah,
put that, but we'll put the link in the description. If you send me a link of all the stuff that you've spoken about, I'll bung it all in the description. People will be able to find you and download some of those interviews that you've done over the last however many years it is.
yeah, quite a lot. Quite a
Yeah, and amuse themselves there. Brilliant. Well, I will be back, of course, with more monologues and more wonderful interviews. But in the meantime, a great big thanks to Alan, and I will see you all very soon. Till then, take care, look after yourselves, and goodbye.